If you take resveratrol, did you know that resveratrol works differently in your body depending on how much you take every day? If you're not careful with how much resveratrol you take, you may achieve a completely different benefit or result from the one that you intended. Listen, I couldn't believe it either until I saw it in my own eyes. What we're about to uncover today is one of resveratrol's biggest secrets. And it's kept very well within its polyphenol family, which includes fisetin, quercetin, pterostilbene, and others. So today we will understand how these molecules affect our systems, what they do to our bodies, and even to our DNA after we take them. This video is part of our investigation into resveratrol that started with this shocking discovery in Dr. David Sinclair's own study that showed that low resveratrol worked better for longevity than high resveratrol. It's been a complete shock to me as I've been taking 1 gram of resveratrol on alternate days for 3 years now. Since this discovery, I've gone over 200 studies on resveratrol, and I'm here to tell you that this molecule is much more powerful and complex than I ever imagined. Today, we will continue in our investigation with another fascinating study answering the following questions. If in Dr. David Sinclair's own study, the low-dose resveratrol groups lived longer than the higher dose, why this sudden change of impact when going higher in resveratrol dose? We're also going to answer, what does resveratrol do to cancer cells? Is resveratrol a good supplement to kill cancer or preventing it? Let's continue with our investigation into the secrets of resveratrol right now. Welcome to the Wellness Messiah podcast. I'm your host, Rimon. In conclusion, what have we seen so far? We know that low levels of resveratrol activating longevity in humans and animals. And we know that resveratrol increases the average lifespan both in animals, mice, and insects. We also have seen that lower than half a gram of resveratrol improves blood sugar and insulin in humans, in addition to longevity markers both tested in the wine studies. And wine has very low levels of resveratrol. Now we are moving to the really interesting part. Are you ready for this? So we know that low resveratrol works better for longevity than high levels of resveratrol. But why? If in Dr. David Sinclair's study the small dose resveratrol lived longer in both groups, why this sudden change of impact when going high in resveratrol? It seems that something changes when we go up in the dose. This is a time to expose the dirty secrets of this longevity molecule. In fact, I think that these secrets are kept very well within this polyphenol entire family. The secret to our puzzle lies in the effect of resveratrol on cancer cells. What is cancer? Cancer is a name for a disease, of course, but what are cancer cells, the cause behind this terrible disease? To understand what cancer cells are, we need to understand how our body works. Despite using in our language the human body as a singular noun, it is not single. The body is a country, a republic, composed of 30 trillion individual cells, and all these tiny cells work together to serve you. This service is your health, but for that they need to work for the republic, not for themselves. And cancer cells are individual cells too. Originally the same as our healthy cells, but they broke away from the republic and behave aggressively towards it. You already know that cancer cells divide uncontrollably, consuming all the foods of the republic and invading into nearby cells and tissues. They are criminal cells in the country that is our health, and they are extremely dangerous for the republic for one simple reason. You just need one of these cells to divide excessively to potentially cause a disease. Just one single cell can potentially cause cancer, a disease that can bring the entire republic down to its knees. And our bodies are fully aware of this danger, as well as the DNA in every cell of our bodies. Therefore, your body has mechanisms both within the DNA and outside in the blood, the police of the entire community, which is the immune system, to kill those cells. This DNA programming, meaning a regulation by the DNA on the cell's behavior, is called apoptosis, and it's an important term for us today. The DNA suspects the cell has become cancerous will activate this program. In biology, as I said, we call this apoptosis, and it's a potent way to kill cancer cells and even other stubborn cells that don't want to die. Now in this section, I will go over many studies of resveratrol and cancer, because I want to prove to you without any reasonable doubt what will come next. At the the end of this sequence of studies, I'm going to explain what it means, so don't worry if you don't fully understand it immediately. It will become much clearer as we progress in this video. This conclusion holds the secret of resveratrol and will help you choose the right dose for longevity and for health, so stay with me. Let's examine the impact of high resveratrol. How does high resveratrol affect the human body? We're gonna go study after study and let's see what happens. This study from 2010 called Dose Dependency of Resveratrol in Providing Health Benefits. I'm quoting, studies have shown that at a lower dose, resveratrol acts as anti-apoptotic, as evidenced by increased expression in cell survival proteins. So low resveratrol helps the cell survive. Then they say, at higher dose, resveratrol acts as a pro-apoptotic compound, inducing apoptosis in cancer cells by exerting death signal. At higher dose, resveratrol not only hinders tumor growth, but also inhibits the synthesis of RNA and DNA in protein, so it prevents the cell from dividing. So this study says in essence that resveratrol at different doses does completely opposite things. Let's see another study. This one from 2017. Dual effects of resveratrol on cell death and proliferation of colon cancer cells. Here we study the impact of resveratrol over a 100-fold concentration range on cell death and proliferation. We found that a lower concentration, resveratrol increased the cell number, as did the polyphenol quercetin. As you can understand from here, it's not just resveratrol, it's also its family. At a higher dose resveratrol reduced the cell number and increased the percentage of apoptotic or necrotic cells, thus indicating cytotoxicity, so resveratrol becomes toxic to the cell. This is another study from 2013. Resveratrol induces cell death in cervical cancer cells through apoptosis in autophagy. Cervical neoplasia is one of the most frequent cancers in women. Of course, we are talking about cervical cancer. Here is what they say. Resveratrol treatment in high dose induced apoptosis in all cell lines. There was a decrease in the mitochondrial membrane potential, apoptosis. So resveratrol somehow, via the mitochondria, trigger apoptosis in cervical cancer in humans. This is another study from 2014, resveratrol and cancer. Now they spoke about 1997 study. Topical application of the compound was able to inhibit tumor formation in the two-stage skin cancer. Topical resveratrol prevented tumor formation by promoting apoptosis. What is topical application? Concentrated resveratrol right on the tumor. It is high-dose resveratrol, and again, it causes apoptosis. This is another study. Resveratrol at high doses acts as apoptotic inducer in endothelial cells. I'm quoting, resveratrol was shown to act as a pro-apoptotic agent, and the researcher concluded, resveratrol plays an important role in endothelial cell apoptosis, indicating that resveratrol can be utilized as a potent angiogenic drug, meaning prevention of growth of blood vessels for the cancer. And this is a fresh study from 2022. Here they also measure both low resveratrol and high resveratrol on an active tumor, and they coupled resveratrol with metformin. This is what they found. High concentration of resveratrol inhibited cell growth and induced both autophagy and apoptosis. In this study, they found that high-dose resveratrol work in synergy with metformin to kill cancer cells. And they also showed that low dose have the opposite effect, helping the cell to survive. In this situation, when you have cancer, you don't want to help the cell to survive. Now, this is very interesting, but I have something even more interesting to show you right now. Do you remember the excellent mice study that we showed from 2008, where they put the mice on low dose of resveratrol and it activated many longevity genes? One of the things they were looking for after the mice died is to see an anti-tumor effect of low dose resveratrol. Remember, it's low resveratrol, not high resveratrol. What do you think they found? Let's read from the study. This is a segment about tumor formation in old age. So they dissected the liver of the old mice after they died. I'm quoting, there was also no decrease in spontaneous tumors at the time of the sacrifice. In particular, spontaneous liver tumors were abundant in mice fed the controlled diet or resveratrol, but rare in caloric restriction mice. So low-dose resveratrol, unlike caloric restriction, did not inhibit cancer growth. That's the greatest difference they found in this study between caloric restriction, which we know extend lifespan, to resveratrol. which we found mainly extend health span and also reduces mortality. That gives us a huge hint here. But the researchers were very smart. Let's say what they thought about this result. They came up with the speculation. It is likely that the effects of resveratrol feeding at lower dose are distinct than those observed with higher doses. So there is no doubt the differences in impact between low resveratrol and high resveratrol are completely different. Now we have a mystery. How come the same molecule does two completely opposite things? Because that is what matters the most for our longevity. We need to figure this one out. Without understanding that, we can never know which dose to take and when to take it. In the beginning of this video, I explained how cell death program works in the DNA, but we are missing another program, the self-survival program. Let's hear now Dr. David Sinclair explaining the genetic survival program, and then we will connect both programs together to discover finally how resveratrol works and why it's so mysterious. This is from Dr. David Sinclair's YouTube channel.
These signaling proteins, like the DAF2 one that Cynthia discovered, and the sirtuins that we work on, we didn't know what they were doing at first. It was like, this is crazy. It's got nothing to do with DNA repair and free radicals. But then when we tracked what they were actually doing, it turns out they're speaking to the rest of the cell to keep the cell healthy and alive. So in the case of that worm, those worms weren't just longer lived. The program to survive was activated. Those worms are stress resistant. You can hit them with heat, you can hit them with cold, you can starve them, or just put them in happy conditions. They live longer. The paradigm is that normally a worm responds to its environment. If it's starved, it'll hunker down, it'll survive. But here we had a worm that was mimicking starvation and was able to have the benefits without having to starve itself.
Making decisions isn't easy. Making quick decisions about important things is even more difficult. A tiebreaker is a method that you and I use to make important decisions quickly. You and I specifically use this tiebreaker decision making when we are making decisions using money and deciding what to do with resources in general. For example, during the pandemic, my laptop got damaged. It was a rather old laptop and I couldn't use it. Should I throw it away and buy a new one, or should I fix it? Both options are not cheap. The tiebreaker here is the amount of money I have in that moment in my bank account. If I have a lot of money, I'll buy a new laptop, no doubt. If I'm going to fix it, what if it breaks down again? But if I don't have excess amount of money, I'll repair the laptop, increasing its longevity. Luckily, during the pandemic, I was totally broke, so it was a simple decision, and I took the laptop to the repairman. This is an example of tiebreaker where money is the tiebreaker in the decision making. Our bodies and the DNA too use this tiebreaker method in making important decisions. One of those decisions is whether to help a stressed or damaged cell to live longer and repair it, or to get rid of the stressed cell and create a new cell instead. Both options are expensive for the body, and our bodies can only choose one. Our bodies here too are using the help of the tiebreaker. Whereas in my situation with my laptop, the tiebreaker was the amount of money I had in that time. In our body, it's used the amount of stress the cell has. I define stress here as accumulated damage or a threat to the future survival of the cell. When I say a threat, I mean that the body suspects that this cell won't survive much later. Similar to my thinking with my laptop. If I'm going to repair it, will it survive? And if so, for how long? Now, I said the body is making the decision, but it's not really the body. It's truly the DNA that had its hand on the wheel. And here is how the DNA thinks. If there is a small amount of stress, the DNA is optimistic. It will decide to keep the cell alive. Expensive decision, but it will lead to the youthfulness preservation of the cell. However, if there is a lot of stress or damage, the DNA is pessimistic. The DNA thinks that if it's going to repair this cell with this large amount of stress, it still may not survive. Maybe it's a waste of resources. Here, the DNA decides to get rid of the cell and replace it with a new one. In biology, this decision by the DNA is called apoptosis. And the DNA actually used this method to get rid of old cells and also cancer cells. In the last 15 years, I've seen this stress level as a tiebreaker in other places. For example, you can check the amino acid called L-proline. The body used this same amino acid both to save the cell from dying and also to kill it. The same mechanism do the two exact things based on the amount of stress. So the DNA has two options, longevity or death. What has this to do with resveratrol? Do you remember why grapes produce resveratrol in red wine? It's because the grape skin is exposed to the stress of yeast and alcohol, and the plants use this resveratrol to deal with this stress. Whether resveratrol stresses the DNA directly or activates a bunch of stress enzymes which the DNA has a read on, it doesn't matter. Essentially, when the DNA sees resveratrol, it sees stress. And the DNA views the amount of resveratrol as an indication of the total amount of stress the cell has been exposed to. When the DNA sees low levels of resveratrol, it sees low levels of stress. So the DNA turns off bad aging genes and turns up good longevity genes. The DNA makes the decision for the cell to live longer. Longevity. When the DNA sees high level, high concentration of resveratrol in the cell, it sees high levels of stress. And the DNA becomes more pessimistic. It makes the decision to push the cell towards death. Let's kill the cell and create a new one with the parts and energy that we have saved. That makes sense. Now you can easily see why resveratrol will trigger different responses in different doses, and we can use both of these doses to our different purposes. So this is one of the main secrets of resveratrol. Now remember my old laptop? Interestingly enough, I'm still using this laptop to record this very video. Who knew that it will survive more than 2 years later after it collapsed? That's longevity. And for longevity, you don't want to throw away things. You want to repair them. Exactly like with my laptop, we never know how long the cell can survive. I want to give you another analogy just to make sure that you're hearing me on the same page, because this is important. Owning a car. When you own a car, you are the owner. You have your hands on the wheel, just like the DNA. The car in this situation is like the cell, the encapsulation of the DNA. Now, if you have a car that got a minor hit or got a puncture, you're gonna pay money and repair it. There is no question. You'll make the decision for the car to live longer. You're not gonna throw it away. However, if you suspect that your car is too depreciated, you go every week to the mechanic. It means that your car has went under too much stress for too long. You're pessimistic about the future of this car. Here, you would rather sell the car and use the profit to buy a completely new car. The tiebreaker in this situation for you is how much stress and damage your car has suffered, so you can make a decision about how to allocate resources properly. So here, the DNA is the owner of the car and the decision maker, and here the cell is the car, and resveratrol indicates the overall amount of stress that the car has suffered. Does that make sense to you? So this is the insight, and this is the theory, and we already proved we know that low resveratrol is good for longevity. This corresponds well with low levels of stress in the cell and for the DNA. And today we also proven the other aspect of this. Without any doubt, high resveratrol triggers the cell death program in the human body, in the human cells. This program is very good for killing cancer cells. Now we have an interesting question. So having said and having seen what we have seen, isn't this anti-cancer pro-apoptosis cell death activity good? Well, sometimes, but not all the time. Do you remember my laptop example? By helping my laptop to survive, it lived longer. Making healthy cells survive longer helps longevity, as long as they do not become cancerous. But there is a time and place for everything. From time to time, forcing cancer cells to die can be good. I want to give you another analogy. You know, our bodies are like large organizations of cells. The purpose of this organization, containing 30 trillion cells working all together, is to make you healthy. You are the only customer that this corporation serves. And like every fit organization, we need to take some time to lay off some unproductive employees. Every quarter, you need to fire some employees in the organization to open up space for new recruits. But you don't want to fire employees all the time. You don't want to put stress on employees to commit suicide, meaning to quit their job. You don't want to push cells to die for no good reasons all the time, even if they're just slightly damaged or are exposed to high levels of resveratrol. That will not lead to healthy, long-lived community, and it will not lead to a long, healthy living body. This is one of the main reasons why in Sinclair studies, high-dose resveratrol was not good for longevity. Now we have an interesting question. Remember, based on what Dr. David Sinclair does, I used to take 1 gram of resveratrol. Now what 1 gram of resveratrol does in humans? I found a fantastic study that measured exactly that. 1 gram of resveratrol on healthy humans, just like you and I. Let's see what they found. This study from 2010, called Resveratrol Modulates Drug and Carcinogen Metabolizing Enzymes in a Healthy Volunteer Study. That's important, because remember, most of the studies on resveratrol happen to be on sick individuals. This is what they did and what they found. 42 healthy volunteers were participating in this study. Study participants took 1 gram of resveratrol once daily for 4 weeks. The researcher said, "We conclude that resveratrol can modulate enzyme systems involved in carcinogen activation and detoxification, which may be one mechanism by which resveratrol inhibits carcinogenesis." So what they say that 1 gram of resveratrol causes apoptosis and gives protection against cancer. This corroborates that the dose I used to take, 1 gram, it fits to the activity of high-dose resveratrol. So 1 gram of resveratrol will help us to kill cancer cells in the immediate time frame, but in the long term, it won't increase lifespan if we use it chronically. And to me, low-dose and high-dose resveratrol are completely different supplements with different impacts. Since we spoke about cancer, I want to put a legal disclaimer. All this talk about cancer isn't a suggestion for cancer therapy or any medical advice or suggestion of any kind. Let me tell you my personal perspective, what I do with this information. Frankly, I'm doing other things to protect myself from cancer. Low-dose resveratrol has a different role in my overall strategy. As a subscriber, you probably already know that. If you're outside of the subscription, remember that resveratrol is just one supplement in the overall longevity and youthfulness preservation strategy. This is what we talk about in this channel. There is another thing about my body. Our bodies, when we are young, have a very robust, strong anti-cancer protection. I'm 35 and I don't need resveratrol pushing cells to die. When I'm going to be 50, my perspective is going to change. High-dose resveratrol will probably be a very active strategy in my lifestyle. Last note about resveratrol and cancer. This is very important. I would never take low-dose resveratrol or even drink red wine with low-dose polyphenols if I had an active tumor in my body. I don't want to do anything that is going to help these defective cells survive or keep them young. I want to push them towards death. Staying alive is more urgent than preserving youthfulness. Let's get back to the dichotomy between low resveratrol and high resveratrol, because now we are really delving into resveratrol secrets. This impact of high resveratrol that we just uncovered can explain a lot of things that confused us before. It can explain the results of Dr. Sinclair's study, when low resveratrol worked better for longevity. It can explain the results we have seen with humans, both in red wine activating longevity genes, and the results with the blood sugar insulin study in humans, where less than 500 milligrams of resveratrol actually worked better and more consistent. This also explains how come red wine, with supposedly low levels of resveratrol and other polyphenols, is still effective in reducing mortality in humans and activating longevity genes. And the last insight here, and this is a big one, this has to do with another controversy in resveratrol. We solved here another huge mystery. How come resveratrol not extending lifespan in healthy people and healthy mice, but does so in obese mice and potentially obese people? So one of the criticisms of resveratrol is that it does not increase maximum lifespan. There is no doubt that resveratrol increases health span, and it reduces mortality, as we have seen. Reducing mortality means that on average we live longer, and health span means that we end up with a healthier body all throughout until the end. But maximal lifespan, how far we can potentially live, the maximum reach that we can achieve, that's debatable about low resveratrol. And even if low resveratrol increases somehow maximum lifespan, which actually happened with the every other day feeding in Sinclair's study, this is only a marginal increase. It's not a big one. On that, there is no doubt. So why does resveratrol not increasing maximum lifespan on healthy people? Because you cannot increase the maximum lifespan without reducing cancer and tumors. We want to stay young and alive at the same time. And cancer doesn't care how healthy and young the rest of the body is. It's just a defective cell that hurts the organization. These animals I showed you with the low resveratrol, they died with healthy younger bodies, but with tumors, just like they showed in the mice study. So how can resveratrol increase the maximum lifespan of obese animals? Let's think about it. Obese animals die earlier because of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And what resveratrol does? Resveratrol does protect the cardiovascular system, keeps the heart young, and reduces sugar levels. This way, low-dose resveratrol targets the exact reasons obese mice and probably obese people die prematurely. Now you understand the mystery. Now you understand why obese mice and possibly obese people are very likely to live longer in their maximum potential on low resveratrol dose, but not necessarily healthy, thin people. Does that make sense to you? So that's how resveratrol dose can impact cancer cells and our longevity. This helps us a lot to our investigation, as well as understanding the tiebreaker system inside of every cell in our bodies: longevity or death. But besides cancer cells, there is another type of extremely dangerous cells that you might have heard of. These cells are the hottest topic in our longevity community: senescent cells. These aging infecting cells are a real threat to your longevity. They can age your entire body, infecting other young cells with aging. A serious, serious problem. Now we are about to discover what resveratrol does to senescent cells in different doses. I'm sure that this is going to surprise you, since I was shocked when I discovered this. And this senescent cell piece is another huge piece in our investigation. And prove once and for all that resveratrol in different doses is a completely two different supplements. So what impact does resveratrol have in different doses on senescent cells? Ready for this? Pay attention carefully. This is not the complete video, and it has been taking me so long to record this. And now I've been going over 200 studies to complete this video. Now in the meantime, until the video is gonna be published, I've got a deluge of emails and I didn't want to keep you hanging. So this is the first food for thought. It will help you to digest the rest of the story when you see it. In the complete version, coming soon, I'll take you through my investigation, connecting dot after dot after dot. And every dot will give you another astonishing insight, not only about resveratrol, but also about red wine, olive oil, fisetin, conflict of studies in resveratrol, senescent cells, and more and more. And I must thank Dr. David Sinclair, because if it wasn't for him, we would never have had this amount of data to analyze and think about. We don't have that privilege with other supplements in longevity, you should know that. So thank you, Dr. Sinclair, for that. And it's a great opportunity to say thank you so much and how grateful I am for everyone who contributes to my channel via Patreon. The trust you put in me, and with your help and the energy boost that you give me, you keep me sharp to produce the best videos on this channel. And because of that, I want to do a special thing for you. And I'll release this video to you via Patreon system before anyone else. And it's without ads. You'll get notification from me directly, but of course a week later everyone is gonna see the entire thing for free. Until I got this recorded, stay healthy, stay young, and see you in the next video where we uncover the mind-blowing secrets of resveratrol and its polyphenol family.